The fact that the extent of money and credit increase together shows that they render the same services, and when the functions of one of them are enhanced, the other is also provoked into more lively activity. This does not contradict the other relation between money and credit, in which credit makes cash superfluous. We are told, for instance, that there was less cash available in England in 1838 than 50 years earlier in spite of the tremendously increased production, and in France there was less than before the Revolution. This dual relationship between two phenomena, which arise from the same motive, on one side to stimulate each other and on the other side to limit or supplant each other, is easily conceivable and not at all rare. I would remind you that the fundamental emotion of love can manifest itself sensually and spiritually in such a way that these two forms strengthen each other, but also in such a way that the one seeks to eliminate the other, and that very often an interplay between the two possibilities expresses the basic emotion most fully and vividly. I would remind you also that the diverse activities of the quest for knowledge, whether they incite each other or supplant each other, reveal the same unity in the fundamental interest, and finally, that the political energies of a group become concentrated in divergent parties, according to the nature and the milieu of individuals. Yet these parties display their strength not only in the passionate struggle against each other but also in their occasional association for common action in the interest of the group as a whole. The significance of credit, both as inciting a greater circulation of cash and as taking the place of this cash circulation, indicates the unity of the service which these two means of exchange render. The growth of trade leads to a more rapid circulation of money rather than an increase in the money material. I mentioned earlier that in 1890, the Bank of France put into circulation on current account 135 times as much as the amount deposited with it, while the German Reichsbank circulated 190 times as much as its deposits. It is rarely appreciated how incredibly small is the quantity of material with which money renders its services. The striking phenomenon that money disappears without trace on the outbreak of war or other catastrophes only means that there has been an interruption of its circulation, caused or intensified by the reluctance of individuals to part with their money even momentarily. In normal times, the money stock seems to be larger than it actually is, because of the velocity of circulation, just as a glowing spark, rotated quickly in the dark, appears as a glowing circle, but dwindles again to a minute speck of material as soon as the movement ceases. This happens most violently in the case of debased money. For money belongs to that category of phenomena in which normal activity has determinate limits and extent, while any deviation or malfunctioning causes vast and almost inconceivable damage. Typical examples are the powers of fire and water. Good money does not have so many side effects as does base money, and since its use need not be so strictly regulated or supervised, it can circulate more easily and more smoothly than can bad money. The more precise the form in which money renders its services, the smaller is the quantity of money required and the more easily can its place be taken by a more rapid circulation. The increase in transactions can also be accomplished by diminishing the value of coins instead of augmenting the quantity of tangible money in circulation. The trend of coinage is generally from larger to smaller coins. 1. Characteristic example is the English farthing, equal to 0.12 grams of silver, which was for a long time the smallest coin. Only from 1843 were half-farthings minted. Until that time all values below a farthing were excluded from money transactions, and any exchanges that involved values lying between two whole farthings were rendered difficult. A traveler from Abyssinia reported, 1882, that trade was considerably hampered because only one coin, the Maria Theresa thaler of 1780, was accepted, and small coins were practically non-existent. If somebody wanted to buy barley worth half a thaler, he was obliged to take other goods for the balance of his coin. On the other hand, trade was reported to be particularly easy in Borneo in the 1860s since the value of the talar corresponded with approximately 4,000 cowrie shells, and thus poor people had money for even the smallest quantities of goods. It is true that, as a result of the divisibility of the coin, free assistance was no longer given. The loans and mutual help that are the rule in primitive conditions disappear as soon as a money equivalent is available, and consequently demanded, for even the smallest service. But mutual aid, which is at first a social necessity and later a moral obligation or simple kindness, does not yet signify the possibility of a proper economy, any more than does its opposite, robbery. The offering of gifts develops into an economic system only when trade and its objects become reified. This subjective procedure, the exchange of gifts, is certainly of great value, even economic value, but it sets very narrow limits to the economy, and these can be removed only by measures that destroy the values. One such measure is the introduction of small coins. The dissolution of the substance of money into atoms, so to speak, considerably increases the volume of transactions, and by accelerating the circulation of money it increases, in effect, the quantity of money. In other words, the manner in which money functions can be a substitute for an increase in the quantity of money material. Finally, some of the effects of money have a sense that is incongruous with the nature of the money material itself. It is one of the functions of money to concentrate, as well as to represent, the economic significance of objects in its own idiom. The unity of the sum of money that is paid for an object incorporates the values of all the elements of its uses, extending perhaps over a long period of time, as well as the particular values of its spatially separate parts and the values of all the powers and substances that prepared, and finally ended in, money. A money price, no matter how many coins it includes, is still a unity. The complete interchangeability of its parts confines the meaning of money exclusively to its quantitative sum, and the parts form a total unity which scarcely exists elsewhere in practical life. If one says of an extremely valuable and complex object, for example a country estate, that it is worth 500,000 marks, then this sum, however many specific presuppositions and considerations it is based upon, concentrates the value of the property into a unitary concept, in just the same way as when a simple, unitary object is valued in terms of a unitary coin concept, for example, that 1 hour of work is worth 1 mark. This can only be compared with the unity of a concept that brings together the essential characteristics from a number of individual instances. When I use the general term tree, for example, the characteristics that I abstract from very different manifestations in individual trees are not merely assembled side by side but are integrated in a unitary existence. It is the deeper significance of a concept that it is not simply an aggregate of characteristics, but an ideal unity in which these characteristics encounter each other and are fused together in spite of their differences, and it is in this fashion that the money price brings together in a concentrated unity the numerous and wide-ranging economic meanings of objects.